Thank you for joining us. My name is Courtney Ponte. I'm the host of the Real Estate Report. Today I have with me is Christopher Carreiro, attorney, selectman, licensed broker, and the list continues. So our first topic of the day, I think is the biggest topic regarding Swansea real estate, is the Swansea Mall. So Chris, can you give us an update on the Swansea Mall and what is going on at this time?
Well, the Swansea Mall seems like it's getting the most attention right now. It's all over the press. Everybody's interested in the mall. And if you think about it, it's Swansea's flagship. If you're not from the town of Swansea, maybe you're from a suburb or a city nearby, you think of Swansea and you think of the Swansea Mall. And unfortunately, as we learned recently, March 31st will be the last day that the Swansea Mall is open, unfortunately. So what does that mean for the community, specifically how it relates to the real estate market in Swansea? I really do not see it impacting the real estate market. However, it will impact our tax revenue. Right now, the Swansea Mall, the owners, Carreiro Group, pay approximately $250,000 a year in taxes. Now, when they close and they stop generating the revenue that they're generating right now, that's going to decrease the value of the property and the taxes that we'll be able to assess on the property.
Right.
So I don't see the Carreiro Group paying what they were paying, for instance, right now. I see it going down, but it's not going to go down to zero. So if they're paying $250,000 a year, and let's just hypothetically say the value decreases and now they're going to pay $100,000. So we have $100,000 worth of tax revenue that we won't be receiving.
Right.
So if you take that $100,000 and you divide it by a tax base of 8,000 households plus our commercial base, you're really not going to see a significant difference on an annual basis, and certainly not on a quarterly basis. I think the average household will probably be impacted between $5 and $10 a household on an annual basis. So it's not that big of a tax burden in terms of the effect it's going to have on the community and residents of the town of Swansea. But there's a lot of upside potential with that property. If it's redeveloped properly, then I see that we can actually raise significantly more tax revenue than we're receiving today. But I think it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. And I hope that the town of Swansea participates in the redevelopment, because I think it's going to require a public-private partnership.
Yeah, I'm sure the residents of Swansea are going to be glad to hear that it's not going to impact their real estate taxes significantly. And actually, I was at an open house not too long ago, and it was a Rhode Island resident, and they were inquiring about the Swansea Mall, and what is that going to do to the town of Swansea? It's the Mecca, it's the town center, and if they're coming from out of state to purchase in Swansea, what's going to happen there? They want to know how it's going to be redeveloped, and what is it going to mean to them if they were to choose Swansea as their new home base?
So it's the first question that everybody asks me these days is what's going on with the Swansea Mall? I'll go to the store or I'll go to pump gas, and people will come up to me and they'll be like, hey, I read about the article about the Swansea Mall. What's going to happen with that? Like I said before, it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I think it's going to get much better. And I think that we're almost near the bottom in terms of where the Swansea Mall is now.
Certainly.
And, it's kind of interesting because I think there's a interesting analogy to be made between what's going on with Brayton Point and Somerset and what's going to be happening with the Swansea Mall. So Brayton Point is of very little value compared to what it once was. So this is the point in time where they're generating the least tax revenue. Right now they're in the process of redeveloping it. So that's going to continue to increase in value. It's going to start generating significant tax revenues. And the upside potential that it has is really unlimited. Similarly, in Swansea, with the Swansea Mall, we're going to see it hit bottom, and then we're going to see it redeveloped, and then hopefully we're going to see it generate more tax revenue than it's generated in the past 10 or 15 years. So there's light at the end of the tunnel, and it's an important issue, and I don't believe people should be making decisions in terms of real estate transactions, residential real estate transactions, based on what's going on in the Swansea Mall, because there's only upside potential there.
I totally agree.
So what's going on in the Swansea real estate market in Somerset?
So the discussion of the day, as we're approaching the spring market, We're talking about what you should do to sell your home. So as an attorney or a broker, what would you say would be the first thing to do to sell your home in the spring market?
Well, you have to make sure that you have people in place that are going to give you the best advice. So you want to make sure that you have a competent real estate agent. And when I say competent, I mean somebody who is not just well educated in the area of real estate and real estate transactions, but somebody who has a good support system, a good mentor, somebody that they can go to if they have questions as well, because every real estate transaction is different. Things come up every single time that you may have never seen before. So that real estate agent it has to be competent and know when to make a decision based on their own discretion and when it's time to maybe seek out some help. So you want to make sure you have somebody in place that has some experience, that's competent, and that has a good network of professionals that they can go to. That way you're covered on all bases.
So once you find your real estate agent and a client reaches out to you, what would you give them for advice as an attorney?
As an attorney, with a client that approaches me and would like advice on how to sell their property, I would advise them that they really need to make sure that they disclose everything they know about the property. You don't want to be in a situation where you are aware of a defect in the property, whatever that may be, and you haven't disclosed it, and it is found out subsequent to the transaction that there was a problem. And there's possible evidence that you knew about that problem, but you failed to disclose. It is so important to make sure that in all transactions, real estate transactions, that if you're aware of a hidden defect that is not noticeable on its face, that you disclose that defect. Otherwise, you can be held accountable for that, and that could cost you a lot of money in damages, legal fees, court costs, and it's really important that you let your real estate agent know, because your real estate agent is going to know how to deal with that.
When meeting with a seller client, I always give them a property disclosure, and I tell them disclose, disclose, disclose. Not only is it the most honest way to do business, but when you go through the repair contingency and the inspection, you want to make sure that there's no disclosures there, because then they have the opportunity to negotiate that, and the price that you've settled on, the sales price, can now be renegotiated depending on what needs to be repaired.
So I totally agree. I think that every seller should disclose everything in a seller disclosure form. A lot of the time, the real estate agents have these forms. They're pretty standard forms. They will list literally everything. A lot of the things that are listed on there are just not applicable. So you might not have some of the things that are listed there, so you don't have to report the condition on those things. But what is applicable, you want to make sure you include. And it asks questions as well, things like, the vendors that you use to service different appliances and whatnot. Maybe it's the service provider for your boiler service and maintenance. Maybe it's if you have a pool, it's your pool vendor who comes in every year and makes sure that it cleans out everything and the water is the chemically correct and whatnot. So all of those types of things are disclosed on this. And that way, you're crossing your T's, you're dotting your I's, you're making sure that later on, there's not going to be anything that comes up that's going to cost you money and time and litigation, or any embarrassment for that matter.
I've actually listed a property not too long ago. It had an easement on the property. It was the right to a burial ground. And something like that you'd also want to put in the disclosure, because that could prevent someone from purchasing the property if they didn't know about the easement prior to signing the offer or the purchase and sale.
Yeah, generally speaking, easements aren't too big of a deal, but if somebody is buying a property with intentions to make improvements on that property, to construct a structure on that property, or do something in the area in which the easement is located, well, that's a problem. And if you know about it, the easement needs to be disclosed. But what I find as an attorney, a lot of the times people don't even realize there's easements, and the most common type of easement is utility easement. National Grid or your natural gas company, whatever utility provider that you have, they have easements all over the place. Water department, there's easements all over the place. So that's we're going to discover that when we look at the title of the property. So a real estate agent might not know that right off the bat, because it's not something they're looking for, but it will probably come up later on. However, you don't want it to come up later on if you knew about it ahead of time. Disclose it someplace. Maybe as a real estate agent, they want to put that in the listing itself, in the MLS listing, and the disclosures. Property is subject to an easement. Maybe it's an abutting parcel that uses that easement for the purpose of accessing, an area that is landlocked. You see that stuff all the time. So it's not a huge issue, but it becomes a huge issue if the easement is stopping the prospective buyer from doing something they intend to do with the property.
As a real estate broker, what would you tell the homeowner when they're getting ready to list their home? Declutter, depersonalize the space, maximize curb appeal. What's most important?
Well, once you decide who your real estate agent is going to be, because that is your threshold issue, that's probably the most important. Like I said before, you need somebody who's competent, somebody who has a good support network, and has professionals on hand if they have any questions. That way you're fully covered. Once that has been accomplished, the next step is to make sure that your house presents as best as it possibly can, to make sure you get top dollar. Right now in this market, especially in the coming spring market, there's going to be a lot of people selling their house because that is the prime time to sell a house. Now there's going to be a lot of inventory on the market. You're going to be competing with other sellers. That's not to say though right now that there aren't more buyers than there are sellers. It's still a seller's market, but when people are looking for a home, they're going to be looking at what else is on the market. So you're going to be comparing your house to other houses. Like I said, you have to make sure that your house presents as good as possible, as great as possible. So you have to make sure that you have a real estate agent that is going to use a professional photographer. iPhones take great pictures, but they don't take great pictures for real estate. You need a professional photographer. That way your house presents the very best it possibly can. You also mentioned decluttering. We all put things off to the side in our house. We might get a couple appliances for Christmas all at the same time. You put them on the countertops, and by the time you know it, you don't realize it, but there's a lot of things in your home that we're probably not even using. Maybe you end up buying coffee every day. But you have a coffee maker on your countertop. Put the coffee maker aside. Put that someplace where nobody can see it for now. Things like that. Put those aside. You're not using them anyway. That way your house looks bigger and much more of an open space. You might want to even take some photographs off the walls. Not because people don't want to see that a family lives there. People know that a family likely lives there. But they want to be able to envision their family there. They want to be able to envision building a family in that home. So depersonalizing it a little bit will help a buyer be able to visualize what their home's going to look like if they were to buy that house, not just what your home looks like.
Photography is everything. Living in the digital age, the first 3 photos they're so important because that's what's really going to capture that buyer. If they don't like the first 3 photos, they're already on to the next one. Everything's at everyone's fingertips. It's important to declutter because it shows the space that's really there. If you have 5 appliances on your countertop, guess what? They're not looking at the appliances. They're not looking at the countertops. They're focusing on the appliances. And when people see clutter, they get anxiety. They can't live there because because their anxiety is high.
They're turned off by it.
They're turned off. So I think those are the 3 things when you're going to list your house that you really need to pay attention is declutter, professional photography, and then curb appeal. First thing I always tell everyone is to paint their door. That's the first thing your potential buyer is going to see is that front door. And the front door says a lot about you. And
it's not the first thing you think about either, the front door. I mean, you look at the front door, use it maybe every single day. You don't necessarily think to paint it.
Right, and you don't look at it. It's your front door. You know, you're fumbling for your keys, you're on your phone. You don't look at it. Take a step back, look at it. Does it need a paint job? A fresh paint job is everything. So I think those are really important. You know, trim the hedges, get the lawn cut, hire a professional landscaper if you need it. It's really important, especially going in to the spring market with all the competition.
And some people, you know, we're so busy with our lives that maybe you didn't do a fall cleanup. Maybe you want to do the fall cleanup in the winter. Just get it done. That way when the spring comes around, you're able to bring in a landscaper that can quickly make everything look great.
Chris, we're going to move over to the local market report. So each month I like to do a comparison of the Swansea and Somerset market. In January 2019, there were 16 houses sold in Swansea and 15 houses sold in Somerset. January is always a slow month. You have the holidays. It's always a low volume month. But it's continuous that Swansea always sells more homes sell in Swansea than it does Somerset. Why do you think that is?
You know, it's interesting that you bring that point up. So Somerset actually is, although it's smaller in geographic size than Swansea, it has a larger population and it has a greater number of households than Swansea does. So it's interesting to see that Somerset selling 15 houses in the month of January and Swansea selling 16 houses. I think it's very telling of where the market is. It seems like Swansea seems to be a little bit of a hotter market than Somerset, and perhaps that could be because of the uncertainty with Brayton Point and the tax increases that they're experiencing over there. It's still a very desirable community to live in, but right now it seems like the market's more hotter in Swansea than it is in Somerset.
Yep, and the average list price and the average sale price will actually determine that. So the average list price in Swansea was $368,000, and in Somerset was $240,000. Now, do you think lot size has anything to contribute to those numbers?
I think that Swansea has a lot of new construction homes right now. We have a lot more area that can be built out, as where Somerset's fully built out, and they have areas where they have larger homes, but the homes that they generally speaking that they have are not as large as the homes being built right now in Swansea. So it makes sense that Swansea's average list price is higher, because I think on average the new construction is driving up the average list price in Swansea. And in Somerset, there's a very small inventory of new construction houses. There is a new development coming in Somerset. There's going to be 5 houses being built off of Luther's Avenue. That's right near Somerset Federal Credit Union, and that's probably the biggest new construction development in Somerset at this point in time. Perhaps when that gets going, you might see a little bit of more of an uptick in Somerset's average list price.
So the average price home sold with buyer representation, meaning they were represented by a real estate agent, in Swansea was $362,000. In Somerset it was $236,000. That's quite a significant number. But what's even more interesting is the average of homes sold, which includes the for sale by owners. There's a huge
disparity there.
Yes.
Between the houses being sold by real estate agents and brokers versus the homes being sold by the sellers themselves without real estate agents or without brokers or without any professional involved. So I think the takeaway is, just by these simple numbers that we're using, Swansea's average home sold with for sale by owner is $281,000 versus $362,000 with buyer representation. I think it's very telling that homes are sold for a greater price with professionals involved, with real estate agents involved, versus selling them on your own. And it's not just in Swansea. I think the statistics, generally speaking, across the country speak for themselves on that point.
So this is actually my favorite statistic. It's the average number of days on the market. So in Swansea it was 86, Somerset it was 50. This actually flipped from last month because the houses in Swansea were selling faster. There were 2 homes that sold over $700,000 in Swansea, and I think that has a lot to do with this number.
So the houses that are more expensive, generally speaking, take longer time to sell.
Exactly.
There are less people in the market for more expensive houses than there are for people looking for houses that are between $250,000 and $350,000. It seems like that's where the sweet spot is. Those are the houses that go under agreement the fastest. Those are the ones that close the fastest. As soon as you start selling houses for the high 4s into the 5s and anything above, you start to see an increase in the average number of days to put the house under agreement.
Right. As soon as you hit the 450 mark, you're looking just days to offer, at least 50 days. The buyer pool is smaller, and it really impacts how quickly you're going to close.
And like you said, for this particular report, the local market report, January 2019, there was an average number of days in the market in Swansea was 86, so more days on average to put the house under agreement, versus in Somerset 50 days, and the reason why was because there were those 2 houses that sold in Swansea for over $700,000. One was 45 Brenton Road in Swansea for $940,000. The other one was 20 Seaview Avenue for $755,000. Then there was a new construction property for $439,900 that sold on Windward Way. So more expensive houses, going to take a little bit longer to sell because the buyer pool is less.
Now, 45 Brenton Road and 20 Seaview Avenue, both of those are waterfronts. So I think that takes into consideration those price tags.
Oh, they're beautiful properties, very large properties and very beautiful.
The highest priced homes we have that sold in Somerset were 131 Anchor Drive, 252 Franklin Road, and 270 Rhode Island Avenue.
All sold for under $320,000. So if you compare this to Swansea right now, the market's just different. Last month you had higher price homes selling in Swansea, and in Somerset you had lower price homes selling in Somerset for the month of January. That doesn't mean next month it might be the opposite.
Right. I'm interested to see how the month of February performs in the market.
Now, it'll definitely be interesting because we're getting into now the spring month. So, March is the first month for spring, and this is where things start heating up. So you're going to see things heat up towards the end of February, early March, and then in April. That's going to be probably almost the peak of the market. That's when everybody has prepared their homes for sale and they're about to list them. So it's going to be interesting to see how the market performs this year. Interest rates have increased slightly, but they're still good. They're floating around 5%. That's still an excellent interest rate, especially ask people that bought a house 25, 30 years ago. They were paying 10% interest. So 5% is not bad. It's still a good time to buy.
Well, Chris, I think that's going to be a wrap. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it, and I look forward to coming on the show again.
Okay.